Hello, everyone, and welcome to Recovery Live. Today, I am one of your special guest hosts, Cass.
And I'm Lisa. I am also a special guest host. Usually we're hiding behind the scenes, but with the boss out of town in Missouri, we've taken over Recovery Live this week and, from what I understand, next week as well. So, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about mental health. I think most of you know that have been watching for a while that Cass and I both have backgrounds in psychology and counseling and forensic psychology and all sorts of fun things. So that's kind of where our knowledge lies. So we're going to explore that a little bit today. But before we start, just going over some of the events and things we have coming up today. Actually, Tom and Alicia are out in Missouri doing what they're calling as a master class. And this is for individuals who work in the field of recovery, and they're doing an overview of our program and how it works and why it works, and going in depth a little bit so that they can start to see the benefits of the 3-day retreat process, and hopefully get another retreat going out in Missouri. And then we have retreats coming up in New York City. Whoop, whoop. Our first one is in Kips Bay. And then we have one in New Jersey, Schoolies Mountain. And we have a couple out in California, Northern California, and Malibu. So check out our website to get the dates, and registration is open for all of those. The only one that's not open yet is virtual, but that's not till January, so we got some time on there. So we hope to see some of you there. Another cool thing that's going on this month is we are doing a donation campaign. So for the month of July, anyone who donates $5 or more in the month of July will receive a special gift. So if you go to our website and go to the donate tab, you'll be able to see the breakdown of the gifts that you'll receive. And you'll get a personalized thank you note from myself or Cass or Tom or one of us. So we're just trying to get funds ready to raise scholarships for our fall retreats and our general campaigns. So please, if you've been considering donating, now's the time. Get some cool CTBR swag to bring around with you and support our mission to end addiction. So those are our big announcements for today. And then we're going to jump right into mental health and like why are we talking about mental health, right? Like it's one of those words I think that people have been hearing probably not enough but too much. You know, they hear it all the time but they don't know why, and it's something that I think our culture pushes down a lot and tries to silence, but it's really prevalent. I mean, one stat I just saw is that 1 in 5 American adults will struggle with some form of mental illness in their lifetime. 1 in 5. That's pretty significant, right, Cass? Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on it? What have you seen?
I think exactly what you were saying, that it's something that comes up a lot, but it's also pushed down. It's kind of this like weird paradox. And I think that when it is brought up, it's brought up in more of a negative manner. Whereas, like, when you talk about your mental health, or sometimes you'll hear someone say like I need a mental health day, or if someone admits to struggling with their mental health, it's associated with the word weak, or you're lazy, you're weak if you just do this, if you just get over it. And that, I think exactly what you said, that kind of has to do with our culture and what we've cultivated as being important and what we look at as not
Your
important.
bootstraps and keep going, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't wallow in it, move on. Yeah, you're right. It's very much ingrained into our culture to not allow ourselves to feel any kind of mental anguish or acknowledge it and to just
Mhm.
push it down.
Yeah.
And ironically, like, I think I was one of them, like, even going through an entire degree in psychology and an entire degree in counseling, I still was struggling with accepting my own mental illness. Like, I went to counseling because I had to go to counseling, right? Like, I'm a counselor, like, so I went and I was doing the work, but it wasn't relieving my symptoms. Like, my anxiety, and I've talked about this on live before, like, my symptoms were still so extreme,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't allow myself to go the next step and say maybe I need medication.
Hmm.
And why did I make myself struggle for all those years? why? Like, what was it that prevented me? And being in the field, like, I should have been like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I need this. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't let myself until like role models that I knew kind of came and said, yeah, we're on antidepressants, we're on anti-anxiety meds. Like, if you need
Yeah.
it, take it. Like, why? What's the stigma? If you have a headache, you take aspirin. Like,
Yeah.
so it took me a while, and so if that's coming from within the field, what's everyone else that's outside of the field feeling?
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes being in the field almost makes it worse because you're like, I need to take care of people. How am I
Right.
supposed to be taking care of people if I can't take care of myself? Or I'm like perceived as if I'm taking a medication that I can't take care of myself, that I need
Right.
something else to help me. And now people are going to think, well, how are you going to help me if you can't even help yourself? So I think it
Right.
like it adds like stress, and I also
But
think
the
that
paradox, the switch of that is you are taking care of
yeah,
yourself by taking the meds.
ex-
Like, that's how you need to take care of yourself.
exactly. But
So it's,
it's that
you
stigma.
scream at someone if they had cancer and we're like, nah, I don't think I want the chemo because I don't know, society says it's bad for me. Like, take it, it's gonna
Wow.
help you. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just, it's crazy. Yeah, you are taking care of yourself, but I think you're right. We are natural caregivers and nurturers and kind of feel somewhat of a failure if we can't handle it on our own, but it's
Yeah.
much harder to look in yourself than it is
Yeah, it's a
outside of
difficult
yourself
part. Yeah.
sometimes.
And I feel like
Yeah.
some of it is, at least I know for myself, is rooted in that idea that, like, I think our culture and, the work culture nowadays, especially, is like your self worth is almost like predicated upon your productivity. So if I'm not being productive, I don't feel worthy. And I think that's something I feel like I've been thinking about more lately. It's like if I have nothing to do, it bothers me, and I'm like, why does it bother me? It's okay to sit down and just like do nothing, like whatever. If I have nothing, that like I don't have any like things to get done, but I feel bad. It's not like, oh, I'm bored. It's I feel bad because it's like I'm looking at it as if I'm not doing anything, so I'm not worthy of anything because I'm not pushing and I'm not to the brink of
Yeah.
exhaustion. And I think that that's a part of that stress, and a part of mental health is that I can't admit that I'm anxious and I'm about to collapse, because that means that I'm not being productive, and that means
Right.
that's even worse than just sitting down and saying I need a break, like I can't handle this right now. And
Yeah, and I think you hit on something else too, is like our culture kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Makes stress and overproductivity
good,
this like
Po-
great thing,
yeah,
right? Like,
like
it's
a
a
holy
positive
grail, like
thing,
that's what you should achieve. You should
right?
be so stressed you're gonna collapse, and like then you made it.
Right. And if you're not, like you said, it's like, what am I doing wrong? But no, there's value in taking a deep breath. There's value in taking vacation and taking time off. And I mean, Tom and I, and apparently you, are all the worst offenders of this. I mean, it'll be Sunday at 8 o'clock and we're texting about a new registration that came through for a retreat, or what we can do to increase awareness of, Recovery Live. Like, we're the biggest offenders. We don't shut off. And I think we all talk and we know we should, but we
Yeah,
don't do
getting
it.
there. It's getting
We're
to that
getting there.
point.
We're getting there. So I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that our culture definitely encourages and promotes. And I think that's why it's so prevalent,
Mhm.
that anxiety, depression, mental illness in general is so prevalent in our culture, because it's almost valued
Yeah,
to have it, right? Like, if you're not anxious, you're not depressed, you're not stressed, what are you doing?
yeah,
And so it's silly, but there's a real heavy side to mental illness. One of the stats I was reading this morning was that 8.9 million Americans have both mental health problems and addiction issues. So they do go hand in hand, you know, and it's kind of the chicken or the egg, which came first,
Yeah.
the issue or the mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so teasing that out together, you know, we can, through like 12 steps, whatever method you choose, you can kind of work on that addiction and get the tools, but you can't stop. You know, if there's mental illness going on, like you need to work on that too. And sometimes that can go tandemly with the 12 steps, but a lot of times it does require additional counseling or, you know, insight to figuring that out.
Yeah.
So
And it's
it's
definitely getting to that point where you're like, maybe I need to talk to someone, or maybe, you know, like you said, maybe I might need to look at medication, or maybe I need to go to a 12-step program, or and things like that. And that's, I think, one of those we always say, like taking in our emails and talking to participants, like the first step is the hardest part. And
right.
that's just universal for everyone. The first step of just saying like I'm not okay today, or I haven't been okay in a long time, is often the hardest part. And it's a lot of it's the perception and the real stigma that people are going to, again, think you're weak, think you can't
Right.
handle it. And I've had friends that were falling apart at the seams, just every day pouring all over, and just they weren't holding it together. And I'm like, I will walk you into therapy. I will sit there. I'll hold your hand. We can do this together. And they refused. And many
Yeah.
times they were men. So that's also like a level, but they refuse to do it. They think
Yeah.
if I step foot in there, I'm admitting that I'm weak. I'm admitting that something's wrong, and I cannot do that. But yet they'll continue to like just suffer in turmoil and try to just kind of like dump it off on as many of their friends and people that they can, so that they don't have to bear that load as much. But is all of that worth like
Right.
just suffering? It's not. And it should be so easy to just say, oh my God, I need to talk to someone. I'm just going to go make this appointment. It's not a big deal. It's a conversation. But because of the stigma that has been created, and because that people have this, you know, perception that we all have to be tough, we all have to keep it together 24/7. And I've often heard a lot of people, I've heard someone say to me, some some people need therapy, and that's fine, but like I don't, because I can handle it. And that is one, it's horrible. Two, it's not a that's not a nice statement, and it's detrimental. Like,
Yeah. I mean, so Stu, I just want to pull this out because we actually talked about this before we went live, that we call the stress normal. Even you, like Cass, you inadvertently were like, you know, this is normal to do this. It is normal, but it's not healthy,
yeah.
right? Like, unfortunately, we've normalized it in our culture. And it should it be? You know, I guess that's the question. Should it be? And is that what we value? And if the culture is arranged or aligned for that to create success, how do you remain successful without following the norms?
Hmm.
You know? So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of going back in, like someone saying like I can handle it versus someone going into therapy. Maybe the person that is handling it because they have coping mechanisms that they've learned from somewhere, right? So they might have skills that helps them compartmentalize, set boundaries, you know, do these things that help you manage stress, but that they picked up somewhere where like someone else who maybe didn't have an upbringing or an environment that taught those skills,
Hmm.
they need them. Like when you go to counseling, it's not just a cry fest. Like, yeah, there's room for that. There's something cathartic about just bawling your eyes out with someone who's not going to judge you, or if they do,
Yeah.
you don't really care. But the other part of it is getting tools and learning how to set a boundary and say, you know what, like, and you guys know this, like I have a hard boundary from like 5 to 7 during the day because dinner, baths, getting kids ready for bed, like that's a blackout time for me. Like
Hmm.
dinner is something that's always been really important to me, like, and having that family time where the four of us sit down and no distractions, that's a blackout.
Hmm.
So like I've learned to set that boundary for myself. And I didn't always, but like at some point I learned that, and I had to implement it.
Hmm.
So I think, they may be handling it, but I don't think they understand why they're handling it. because everyone comes from a different experience and
Yeah.
have different skill sets. And that's just it. Like counseling helps kind of level the playing field, if you will, and gives you the tools that you need to handle it. Um, and quite frankly, maybe one of those tools is just saying no, and
Yeah.
not taking on so much. We had a volunteer who once said, no is a complete sentence. No is a complete sentence. And it's okay to use it, you
Hmm.
know, if you're overwhelmed and feeling comfortable and confident in your decision. I see Tom, he's saying that he has made the mistake of texting me at 6 o'clock. Oops, 6 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I mean, in the morning, if I'm sleeping, whatever, I get to it when I get to it. But like, I just don't answer when it's my blackout. People can call, they can text, but I'm just not going to answer. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to feel guilty for it, or at least I'm going to try not to feel guilty for it. Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
But I put my phone, like, I have to put it away, so I don't see it. And then it's not cycling in my head.
Yeah.
Um, So, I think that stigma, that treatment, like why people avoid it, because what was this that I saw this morning? It was something ridiculous, like how many people don't actually go out and
Like
receive.
56.8, something like that percent.
It was 37, 50, 47. I'm not gonna find it now because I want it. But yeah, it was some ridiculous number that they don't go out and seek help. And
Yeah.
I think is financial and insurance, because a lot of times there's the unknown about whether or not your insurance is going to cover it, or if you don't have insurance, can you afford it? But
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of low cost options that are out there now,
Mhm.
that can help. And then it's ultimately the stigma.
Yeah.
um, so I think when we do our retreats and we do step 4 and step 5, I mean, that's the closest start to that internal investigation, and then the dialogue of expressing some of
Yeah.
those things that
Like
are going
letting certain
on.
things go that you like held on
Yeah,
to, that you'd probably always have to hold on to. And it's like
right.
you have the space to, it's like almost giving someone permission. A lot of people don't have that space. They've never had a space where they're like, wow, I'm safe. I'm with someone that's here to listen. They're not going to judge me. They're just going to hear what I have to say. And that's it. It's not going to come back around to have like a whole conversation about it. It's just, I'm going to be able to say whatever I need to say, and then it's going to be done. And I think that, like exactly what you're saying, it's creating that space for them, which most people
Right.
don't have in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you go and tell your boss, hey, I'm dealing with anxiety and depression, like there's a chance it could affect your job, or at least in your mind it could,
Mhm.
So I think, and your friends, like you don't want them to think less of you. So you're a retreat, pretty much anonymous to the group that's there. You have usually a complete stranger by
Mhm.
yourself, and they're like, tell me anything you want to tell me. It doesn't leave the room. And that chance to kind of let that off your chest and like let go of it. And then I think the biggest thing is their reaction. They're not
Yeah.
like, oh, you're a horrible person, or like they're just like, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
We all have our stuff. We've all done stuff we're not proud of, and it's okay. It doesn't
Yeah.
define who you are. It's just something you did.
Yeah.
And I think that process really helps them to kind of start the process of letting go, and reinventing themselves and becoming a new self. Like I see Tom up here. He said, we often see people go to therapy after taking the steps. They get permission to use every tool to get better.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that we always promote is like, if you need more help beyond this, like go to
Yeah.
counseling, go to a doctor. Like we're not gonna tell you not to. We're gonna tell you to go. Like it's important. We understand, the holistic view of the self, and it's important that the individual does too.
Yeah. And you heal
So
all parts of that self, like not just one thing and say, okay, I'm great. It's like there's other parts of you that need like TLC that you have to work with. I just
yeah,
thought Sue said this too. I feel
yeah,
like I mean, I heard using the word space when like working at with like Kelly and Erica and them, because they would always make it a point to like say like especially Erica, like this is a safe space. This is a place where like whatever you need to get off your chest, you need to sit in my office and cry, which I did a few times. Like that's fine. It's okay. She's like, I'll cry with you. We'll talk about it. We'll go through
Yeah.
it. And I think that that space has been shrunken and made so small now for most people, and some people don't even have that space, or sometimes it's they don't allow themselves to have that space
Right.
even if it's there. And I feel like I always fell into that category where I am lucky enough, blessed enough to have like really great parents, siblings, like extended family that they were always there for me to talk to, but I wasn't allowing myself to be in that space. And
Sure.
I had so much anxiety. Well, I do have anxiety, but I had so much anxiety about even talking about the anxiety
Right.
and I was feeling. So I remember times like I was like about to like melt down, and I remember just like my mom was like cooking and I'm standing behind her and I just wanted a hug and I couldn't bring myself to ask her, and it's my own mother, and I'm just like staring at her like, and she'd turn around and I would just scurry off. And it took me so long to even get to like, why they're my family, they're there, I know they're there, they're not judging me, but I could not accept that space until I kind of like figured out myself and like did that work.
Mm.
And then now I know that space is there, so I can allow myself to enter that space and be there and let things go.
Hmm.
And I feel like, because often we were talking about this the other day, but often growing up, especially starting as kids, we kind of, and we do it to adults as well, we think we're helping when we try to tell them like it could be worse, or so and so had it worse, or your feelings aren't true. Look at the situation, and
Right.
you understand people are coming from a good, hopefully most of the time coming from a good place. They're not like meaning to kind of diminish your experience, but to me, like, your feelings are real.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're perceiving the situation correctly is different, the
Sure.
actual physical situation. But if you're hurt, then you are hurt, and that's not, often people think it's mutually exclusive. Like if I hurt Lisa, that means Lisa can't be hurt because she hurt me, and so I'm right and she's wrong, and that's it. But we can both be hurt at the same time, and we could have both perceived the situation differently at the same time, and both are reality. They are real outcomes. So
Yeah.
I still have to look at, oh well, how did I hurt Lisa's feelings, and Lisa could do the same. Well,
Uh-oh.
what did I say that might have hurt her feelings? And then we look at it, but often we're told that it's not real, or someone else has it worse, and that's supposed to make us
Yeah.
feel better. And I know that when people have said that to me and put me in those like types of situations, like I began feeling like when I was extremely like anxious and having a lot of issues in high school, I started feeling like I'm not allowed to feel this way because I have a family and I play sports and I'm doing well in school, but I still feel horrible about myself. But I can't, because I can't. I'm not allowed to, because that's not acceptable. It's not real, which just made me internalize it more and more and made it worse and worse. Um, so I think like that's like, if we could just go back to the building blocks and just learn to acknowledge people's
Yeah.
experiences and help them, instead of telling them it's not real or someone has it worse, just help them unravel what they're feeling, because they might at the end say, okay, I perceived the situation completely wrong, and they
Right.
weren't trying to hurt me intentionally, although I am hurt,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. But I
I mean,
think,
it starts early. I mean, that's so ingrained, as kids. Like, as a kid, I'm sure, I mean, maybe not, but like as a kid, I certainly heard the line, I'll give you something to cry about. Like what I was crying about was not worthy of crying about.
mm,
But for the 5-year-old kid who, I don't know, just lost her toy or whatever, like that was a real loss. And, I'll give you something to cry about. It just basically is saying, like, what you're upset about isn't valid. It doesn't matter. And knock it off. Like, so I'm extremely intentional with my kids when they're upset. Like, and I don't know, maybe they drop their Mickey waffle on the floor and like it's the worst day ever, like there there's like tons of, Instagram reels about like the toddler tantrums, but like they're feeling that, so I try not to pull the I'll give you something to cry about line and say, I understand that you're upset that your waffle fell.
Mhm.
What can we do to fix the solution? Can we make another one? Do we dust it off? Like, let's go through this and work through
Yeah,
the process to find a solution. And so acknowledging the feeling is real, but then working through it to a solution.
yeah.
So it's hard,
Mhm.
like,
And
because you
sometimes
just
you're like,
right, like, I'm sorry that I put your milk in the pink cup instead of the blue cup. I understand that. But let's work through it. And it's frustrating because it's things that you really don't like, because our experience is much larger, right?
yeah.
So we've experienced loss of people, of pets, of, all sorts of things. So
Mhm.
we understand how small of a situation it is to lose a waffle, but they
Yeah.
don't. They
Yeah.
don't, which is, you don't want them to. You don't want them to lose that innocence. That's
Yeah.
what makes them children and makes them special, is that they have that innocence. So, to take that away, it just, takes away their innocence. And so I'm very intentional. And that's not to say I don't make mistakes, because I do. I mean, I get frustrated. There's days where
Yeah.
but there's also,
Yeah. That's
I
what I have to
try.
do.
The big thing is like the majority of times I am trying,
Yeah.
and I apologize for my dog barking
Usually
upstairs.
Athena pops off, but she's asleep right now, so
It's probably the mailman, so I apologize.
that's funny. No, I agree. Even the other day, because I was thinking about this conversation and I was like trying to unplug something that was attached to Ryan's Xbox, and he was playing his video game, and I pulled it too hard, and it shut the Xbox off in the middle of the game. So like he's pissed. He like slams down. He doesn't say a word to me. He just was like sitting there like his life is over. And in my head, I'm like, it's a game. Like I I felt bad obviously. So I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I didn't mean to. He's like, I know you didn't mean to. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, kind of like, you're so mad about this. And I'm like, I didn't mean to. He's like, I know you didn't mean to, but you don't understand like when I put like how he feels about the game when he plays, like that he does take it serious. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, really? And then I was like, ugh. I'm like, he does take it serious. It's very upsetting to him. He's actually upset about this. And I'm like, just because I don't care about video games, just because
Right.
I don't think it's real, doesn't mean it's not. And then I was like, oh, and now I feel worse because I'm sitting there telling him over and over, I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter if I didn't mean to, I did it, and he's
Right.
upset. Like I should just be saying sorry. I'll plug it
Right.
back in. And I was just sitting there running through it because I'm like, I'm so bad with that because I just think video games are so dumb. But I'm like, he loves them. That's his like quiet time for
Right.
himself, and he takes it very seriously. And I'm like, I have to relate it to something. If there's things that I take seriously that I'm like, oh my god, that he's like, I don't, who would care about that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I care. So that was just, I was like, oh, I'm like, I had to remember it's serious. He cares. It's just like this was big deal for him. So I need
Yeah.
to just, I'm sorry, and
Yeah.
move on with
It's
it.
true. It's when you said that, I wasn't even thinking about that, but my husband and I do the same thing. Like, I have this goal to make a French macaron. Like, that's my thing. Like, I want to make it, and I haven't been able to because apparently the weather plays a role in it, and it can't be too humid. And it's
Oh.
like he's like, "Are you kidding me?" And like he's like, "This is ridiculous." And like I went out and got like a sifter, and I got like all these special tools. He's like, "What in the world?" I was like, "You have to do it right." Like it's. And he's like, and then he realized, he's like, all right, I get it. He's like, it's kind of like me when I'm doing like a home repair. Like, I want to do it very right. Like, specifically, you have this thing. All right, let's just let it go.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's important, I guess, to recognize even with adults, like, because it's priorities, like what we prioritize, what's important, what we value, and then respecting it, even if we don't also share the same value.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I think I've noticed a lot of within our culture, we've turned away from respecting people's values that are different than our own. And just even again, if you don't agree, you don't have to agree, but to respect it, hear it, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't, I had my hair done last week and I'm sitting at the salon and I made a comment and it was an opposite view of what she had. And I was like, eek, I didn't want to offend her. But we ended up having a 20-minute conversation about something that typically people just start screaming at each other about. And I saw a side to the conversation that I had yet to see because she was willing to talk to me and not yell at me and tell me I was stupid. And we ended up having a lot of things in common. A lot of our views were shared.
Yeah.
But it's just the big topic is where we were different. But when you really get underneath, there's a lot of similarities. And it's the first time I've really been able to have an intelligent conversation with somebody about that topic without it
blowing up.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was really appreciative that she was able and willing to do that. And I keep meaning, I haven't done it, but I keep meaning to send her a note to say thank you for that. Like, it was important to see that there are people that are willing to have that conversation. So
Yeah.
I didn't change my view. She didn't
Yeah.
change her view, but that wasn't the goal of it. Like, the
Yeah.
goal was just to understand each other better. And I think that's something we all need to do a little bit more. And I think that that's like part of the stigma of everything. Like, we're just so like quick to judge someone who's different. But when you get down to it, we're all much more alike than we want to acknowledge.
Yeah. I definitely think part of it, it's like that idea of everything's like mutually exclusive. So if I believe something, it's exclusive. That's it. Everybody's out. Like there's nothing, like there's no string within everything. Like you're saying, there are similarities. It's just and I also think when I was having a conversation a while ago with Reverend Bobby, and I was talking about someone said something that just really upset me, rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, nope, not today. So I was just talking it through, and she was saying that, well, why does it upset you? And I'm like, well, this it makes me feel this way, and I feel like they're like hurting people that I know, and they're like just it was just not a great thing. And she's like, well, like, do you think that was their intention? Like, that's just their belief. Do you think that was their intention was to hurt? I'm like, well, I guess not. I'm like, let me get off my high horse here. And just working it through that. Sometimes like people have beliefs, and for this person it's rooted in their family and the way they were raised, and the religion they were raised in, and that's where that belief comes from. And I was looking at it as if that's their whole personality.
Right.
That's who they are. They have this one belief that I don't agree with, and I think is bad. Well, that's who I immediately went. Well, that's who they are. They're a bad person. Clearly, damn, can't be friends with them anymore. And
right, it's easy. It's easier to write somebody off for their faults than accept them.
Yeah, and be like, okay, and like you said, to understand. Like, so when we started talking through it, I'm like, well, she wasn't trying to hurt me. She's not like she's not a mean person at all. She's very nice.
Right.
And trying to
There's
root that world.
Right.
Yeah, like there's a belief that comes from it comes from somewhere, and it is what it is. That's not necessarily who she is as a person, or it's just, and that's where I think people go wrong, is we think just because I have this one belief, well, it's completely crossed the line, that's it, I'm done with you. But a lot of times, like I say, we don't understand why. Every belief comes from somewhere. So whatever I believe in, that means that came from a long list of experiences and things that I saw, and being educated on certain matters. So it came from something. So you can't just hear a sentence and write it off, because there's so much more. There's a whole book on why that person came to that conclusion that you're missing. So you can't just assume something, although we often do, because like you said, it's a lot easier just to get mad and say, I'm done with you, that's it, than to
try to understand where it came from. And that's that empathy part. It's hard to have empathy and understanding and say, they where did this come from, and really try to understand that point of view. And it takes work. It's just easier to be like, I don't got time for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this Sue's comment. I couldn't agree more with that, Sue. It's interesting too because I was listening to a podcast today. I think it was called like Better. It's like she's a doctor. It's my first one in it, but they were talking about autoimmune diseases and thyroid and blah blah, and they're talking about different ways to manage it.
Mhm.
And she said, a lot of times you can do a lot of the things to manage like Hashimoto's disease, hypothyroidism, right?
Mhm.
You can do the diet, you can do the exercise. She's like, but there's one piece that's the hardest of them all. And she's like, it's dealing with your past trauma. She's like, you would never think, but she's like, in all the patients that I've seen, there's a connection of those that have autoimmune diseases that have some kind of stress response to something.
Mhm.
And you're always like the pedal's always to the floor, you're always in drive. And the real work is figuring out what that trauma is, what the triggers are, and then how to get your foot off the accelerator.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting. I'd never heard that stressors and trauma can cause autoimmune disorders, but here's, a well-known doctor saying, yeah, absolutely it does. And the correlation between it is so high. And she said, of course, women tend to have more autoimmune diseases because we have more stress.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating and
Yeah.
something I had never considered. And I'm another, I'm autoimmune. I got psoriasis, I got Hashimoto's. So, sounds like I got some more.
Got some work to do.
I'm driving in my car. I'm like, all right.
The math is mathing today.
It's mathing. That's right.
Yeah, I feel like so many people overlook that, and even like our reactions to things. Like, I know in undergrad, I took a class that was the psychology of communication. So, from parents, siblings to bosses to friends to just acquaintances, and like being assertive versus aggressive. Um, and part of it was one, having hard conversations, like you said, having those hard conversations with someone where you know it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's something you have to have anyway. And then part of it was also looking at like your reactions to people. So like growing up, my sister and I butt heads a lot because I am the opposite of her. uh, and sometimes it would be, she could do something small and I would rip into her, like rip her to little confetti. That would be it. I'm done with you. Doors are slamming, screams, there's words flying.
Yeah.
And, to her, she's like, you're crazy. You're psycho. That was one little thing. You're crazy. And I'm sitting there and it took me time, but it was like, I'm not reacting to you making that one comment. I'm reacting to the 100 comments since
Right.
I was this years old to now, and all the comments and all those things. That's what I'm reacting to. It wasn't this one thing. I just let them pile up, and I'm
Right.
reacting to 100 things at once. And sometimes that's how we are. We have these like strong emotional reactions, and people think, well, you're crazy. Why are you acting like that? And it's like, well, because it's not this one event. It's, the 30 comments, the
Right.
other 5 little events, and then this. And that was the last straw. And then you have to kind of work your way back and be like, well, what event number one, why didn't I say something? And how did that make me feel? And like, where was I going with this until now? Until this
Right.
moment where now everything's on the table and now you have a lot to work through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tricky though, because like the first time it's like, all right, whatever, like, and you don't even realize the impact until it's big, it's like adding a grain of salt, and that last piece is just the tipping point, and
Yeah.
it's hard, and because again, it's like you don't want somebody like, why are you picking at me, like why are you like calling me out on this, it's just a simple little thing, but then that simple little thing just adds up over and over and over again, and it's
Yeah. I think some of it sometimes, I feel like for us, I feel like you fall into this category. It's like over emphasize. What am I trying
empathize.
to? Yeah, I'm like, what am I trying to say? Yes, over empathizing. Because I know sometimes I feel like I feel like I have a lot of empathy, And sometimes I think I just like ride on that empathy wave too much, where it's like I should say something, but then like I don't want to hurt their feelings. But it's like they need either I can say it in a way that's not going to hurt their feelings, or it's like they need their feelings hurt because this
Right.
behavior does not cannot go on. Like there's were times when my mom's like, I want you to yell at her. I want you to tell her. And I'd be like, goodbye. Or like, I want you to tell this person, like, go ahead, say it. Cause like, she's like, I'm not going to see you cry one more time. You're going to go scream at whoever needs to be screamed at. That's what you need to do at this point. And I'd be like, I can't do it. But
Oh,
sometimes like you need to do it. Like that's what
yeah.
needs to happen. And I feel like people get in their way a little bit because it's like I don't want to make them feel bad, and then at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's like, well, do they care that they're making you feel bad?
Right. Or
So
do
it's
they even know?
or do they know? Because if they don't know, well, now they will know. Now we can work with that. But if they have no idea, then the behavior is going to continue, and you're just kind of you're stuck in a trap in like a little loop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like the tools that you get, you know. So when you go into therapy, you can get the tools of how to have constructive conversations surrounding situations that upset you, and how to address it in a way that is constructive as opposed to destructive. And I think, that's something that a lot of us, I don't want to say a lot of us, but I know there's people that were not raised in a healthy environment, a home environment where they had discussions and worked through problems. It was the screaming, the yelling, the blah blah blah, and while sometimes that's cathartic, it may not necessarily be the most constructive way to handle it, because you could end up hurting their feelings in the
Yeah,
process. So it's that toolkit of how to actually address concerns in a constructive, non-aggressive way that gets your point across and hopefully resolves the solution with both parties intact,
yeah. The best case
Um,
scenario.
but listen, I'm known to kind of go off the cuff and blow up a bit. In my family, I'm the hothead. And
That's what I
yeah,
think.
so if someone needs a talking to or wake up, guess who's going?
Call Lisa.
Lisa.
Call Lisa.
Yeah, so I'm the designated bad guy because I just I get tired of people's excuses, and enough is enough. Like, I'm not going to be
Yeah,
taken advantage of. I'm not going to let the people I care about get taken advantage of. So enough is enough. Knock it off, or take care of it yourself. Like, there's
yeah,
that,
yeah.
separation,
Which
and
to me is like it's not it's like a boundary. Like to me, that's not. I mean, obviously, maybe sometimes you pop off, but I think for the most part, that's a boundary, and I think that was the whole part of my class was like you're being assertive, you're setting a boundary, and you're holding the boundary. Versus people have now construed assertive with aggressive because
right,
everyone's just supposed to be compliant and be like, okay, yeah, I'll keep doing that over and over. Whereas once you set that hard boundary and you stick by it, people are like, what is this? I have never seen this before. So they
yeah,
just equated to being aggressive.
right.
And I feel like I'm definitely the spicy one in my family. I'll definitely I take that, and I was a nut job as a child, but I feel like now that has morphed after work into like I'm more willing to have like the harder conversations and say like I've not this job, I haven't had to, but on a different job, have had to say to someone like, do we have an issue that we need to talk
Right,
about? And like someone in a higher position than me, more 30, older than me, like, but I've gotten to a point where it's like, if we have a problem, we're going to work it out. We're going to have a conversation and we're going to solve it.
right,
What we're not going to do is sit here and have passive aggressive nonsense back and
right.
forth because that is not good for my health or my temper. So
Yeah,
we're not going to do that. And even like with family, like there's been times when, again, I was not the nicest young lady growing up, not the nicest to my family. But as I got older, there have been times where I went to my younger brother and I was mean to him, I'm not going to lie. But, and been like, do you not like when we say this or I did this? And then he'll be like, no, blah blah. I'm like, well, if you just told me, I would have never said I would
right,
have stopped saying it or I would have stopped doing it. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me?
right.
Well, I'm like, I know why you didn't tell me because I was mean for a long time. But but now I'm like, just tell me and I'm not gonna say it or I'm not gonna do it if you just tell me. But if you don't tell me, I don't know. And I
You
think,
don't know.
we're having a grand old time, but you don't think
Right.
it's funny. So I feel like that has just come too, where it's like, if I need to say, like, listen here, and I done it in a respectful way with my parents as well. Like, if there's something that they're kind of like beating around the bush about, I've been like, listen, is this what you're asking me about? Let's have a chat. I don't
Right.
care. I'm
Yeah.
I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. You might not want to hear it, but I'm going to say it now. But like, that goes back to being like lucky enough to have parents where I'm able to do
Right.
that with them now, and
Yeah.
have been lucky to have siblings that I also like am close with and can talk to and like have those conversations. And they'll give it right back to me. I wasn't all evil. There was help.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the exact instance, but like it's one of the things like I want my kids to know is they can talk to me. They have autonomy to tell me if they don't like something or to stop doing something or stop, And like one day I was like busting my older one's chops and like she gave it right back to me. I was like,
Yeah,
good job. Like,
I love it.
like it's just there's something there, So I try to encourage them and like I try to be as aware and intentional in everything that I do with them so that they feel that they have that space that we talked about earlier and they can come to me and talk to me about things. I mean, granted, they're 3 and 6 right now, they're little, but stuff comes up, I mean, I know my older one is like nervous about going into first grade and she has fears and like she can talk to me about that, so it's that safe space, and I think that doing, kind of what we talked, validating their feelings and
Mhm.
not judging them and making them feel important and making them feel heard are all those tools to help them develop healthy tools and skills that they're going to need as they get older to hopefully not necessarily pop off all the time or like retreat and not say anything, but to have the confidence to say, I don't feel like I'm being treated well in this
Mhm.
situation, or I'm not comfortable in this situation, or I'm feeling overwhelmed and seek help, So it's
Yeah.
those skills that I think are so important. Um,
And they
you
like
know, and
they'll be the one that their friends turn to when their
yeah,
friend doesn't have the space to talk, and then they'll turn and then they'll be that space, or they'll be the one that steps in and says, actually, we're not going to do that. Like, that's
yeah,
not working for us today.
right,
So
right, right.
it kind of helps everyone.
Yeah, so I know we kind of went in this weird turntable
It all relates.
mental health and
It's
whatnot. But,
everywhere.
I think one of the biggest tools we have is encouraging people to talk, whether it's to someone, one person, or if you have a community, or if you want to broadcast it, there is, and I know you did an episode on healing out loud in the past, but there's something to be said for being able to share your experiences and have them validated,
Mhm.
and then also find people who have similar experiences. I mean, I I don't know when it happened, but like Facebook groups became like huge a couple of years ago, right? Like there's a Facebook group for literally everything. And why is that? Because people want to have people with similar experiences,
Mhm.
So like when I was pregnant, I was in a pregnancy group, May 2020 pregnancy group. But then I had the Quad Aquinas syndrome. So then I was in a group for Quad Aquinas syndrome. Then my daughter had cleft foot. She had BOR syndrome. So I was in that. Then she had hearing loss. So like I'm in all these groups now with people
Mhm.
that have similar experiences. And, when I was going through the Quad Aquinas stuff and like didn't know what the symptom was or what was happening, I'd go on there and be like, help, what do I do? What is this? Like, how do I? And like people would come on and help me. Like they became my community and they became the people that helped me out because they understood.
Yeah.
So like during COVID, like my friends, my community was my Facebook groups. Like as silly as that sounds, that was how I was healing through my traumatic pregnancy and birthing experience, was
Mhm.
through my Facebook groups and kind of sharing my experience with others, helping them. Like, as I came out of it and had wisdom to share, like, I helped them, and
Yeah.
it kind of goes, as I'm saying it, like, it reminds me of that step 12, like you kind of get through it, and then you're helping people that are still on the other side. And there's that cathartic connection between, like, getting through it and being able to help and keeping you connected to it.
Yeah.
Um,
It makes
so I think, I don't know, I'm probably too much of an open book, but it's kind of become like, I just don't care enough. I don't care enough about the stigma that might be put on me if I help one person. You know what I mean? So back in 2019, 2018, I had a miscarriage.
Mhm.
And it was like, at that point, like, you weren't hearing about celebrities even having miscarriage. Like, it was very hush. Like, it was, you don't tell anyone you're pregnant until you're 12 weeks. You don't tell anyone if you miscarry because you did something wrong. Like, it was very shameful.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know what? No, like, this is ridiculous. So, like, if I would have a conversation with someone, like, I would tell them. And
Mhm.
you know what? Most of the women I shared it with was like, oh, yeah, me too.
Mhm.
And you find this community of people who had a similar experience, but then you're looking around, smacking yourself like, well, why did I just grieve alone for weeks when all these other women have been through? Why aren't we screaming from the mountaintops like, this
Yeah.
happened? Here's what to expect. I mean, my one girlfriend knew. I texted her. I'm like, this just happened. Is this normal? Like, what? And she's like, yeah, sorry. Like, no one told me to expect that. And it like was traumatic. And I was like, are you
Yeah.
kidding? So it became, and I'm keeping graphic stuff out of here for a reason, but,
Yeah.
like, there's something to being loud and,
Mhm.
I don't want to say proud, but, like, sharing the truth of what it is,
Yeah.
because someone's going through it, and the less knowledge they have, the more traumatic it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I
And
had,
knowing they're not alone in
yeah,
general, like
it was awful. Like, it was, I mean, and it was so awful because I was alone in my bedroom crying, like, and I didn't know what to
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
There wasn't, I wasn't allowed. And, like, I shared it with someone at work, and she's like, well, you shouldn't have told anyone you were pregnant anyway. Like, there was no, like, compassion, like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, like, that must be so difficult. It was, you were wrong for telling me that you were pregnant to begin with, so that you don't have to have this conversation that you miscarried.
And that just comes from people's like that I don't want to feel things that aren't positive.
Right.
So why the hell
Right.
sorry, bleep. Why why did you we're never gonna be allowed on again. Why did you put me in a position that now I have to feel your negative feelings? Like how dare you?
Right.
And that's what has been created is that people I call it they wanna just think rainbows and butterflies and like I know people like that and you just can't talk to those people because it's like that's not real.
Right.
Like why couldn't you that's like a like putting a block up. You don't want to have empathy because I don't want to feel that. So just take
Right.
that. So you give like, take that somewhere else, where it's like
It's
that's a
that whole
perfect moment.
stigma again.
Yeah,
Right. It's
and that's a
negative.
perfect moment
Anxiety,
to feel.
depression, OCD, those are all things that make people uncomfortable to talk about. So you have to hide it. But
Mm-hmm.
1 out of 4 women will have a miscarriage in their life. 1 out of 5 Americans have a mental illness. Like, this is prevalent. This is out there. Like, we just don't talk about it. And we need to. We need to normalize. Like, if we're going to normalize a stressful work culture and a stressful, like, culture in general, like, let's normalize the effects of that. And
Yeah,
let's normalize all the negative things that also exist so that people don't feel less than for experiencing them, and encourage people to go get help. So I found that stat I was looking for. So it said, of those struggling with a dual diagnosis, 55.8% received no treatment for either condition, either, and only 7% received treatment for both.
yeah, it's
Come
crazy.
on. there's help, there's solutions out there. Like, we got to get rid of that stigma. We got to get people in there. We got to make things accessible. And like, that's one of the things I love about what we've been doing in the shelters is like, we're making the 12-step program accessible to the people who are in these shelters for free. We're taking out these hurdles. We're taking out the stigma because the shelter's offering it. All your other people that you're living with are there. So it's pulling these boundaries and these hurdles that people put in front of themselves so that they can start to get help. And I think that's why we see such a great success in these shelters, because they let them
creating that space. It's literally being like, okay, you're here. We're just gonna make this your space now. Like we're just gonna move some things around, make it your space, and now like go ahead, whatever you've been holding on to, like giving them permission to let it go and just be. And like we said before, like that's so rare that exists, and that's what when people travel, like when Alicia travels and Dale travels and other Dale and everyone that's going to retreat, they are like creating those spaces.
Right.
Like they're setting that up. They're bringing that because they've seen that and they've been there. And I think that's like half of all of our jobs is just being there, like
being there, showing up.
Yeah. And when I would go out in the field and be with people in active use, co-occurring, it didn't matter like necessarily who I was. It didn't matter my background. It didn't like they don't care what degree I had. They don't care what experiences I had. It was the fact that I was there and I was willing to listen. Yep. And that's what most people need, just being there, having someone that's there wanting to listen to them in any capacity. You could be me, you could be Lisa, you could be someone else from Came to Believe. You could be a priest or this or that. You could any type. It's literally just about you being there and ready to listen. It doesn't matter what background you've come from, and that's what's so important, especially about having the retreats and going into missions and just like expanding on conversations. Is again, we're creating spaces where it's okay to not be okay.
And it's also normalizing getting help. You know what I mean? It's like, it's here, like just it's free. Obviously someone thinks it's important, so they're providing this to you, and so you take it because it's free, and so I think it's just one of the ways that we can combat it. But it's, I don't know, maybe I gotta be louder.
It's a few battles and a big war.
right yeah.
But making ground where you can.
That's it. All right. Well, I think we talked enough today, Cass. What do you think?
I guess we could save some for next week. I enjoyed
it. Yeah, we gotta figure out next week. If you guys have any questions or topics that you want for next week, let us know. Yes. I think Alicia might be on with us, but yeah, throw us an email or a comment, and we will definitely prep for that. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, 1 p.m. Eastern. I don't know. I'm bad with time zones, Cass. You know,
10 a.m. Pacific time, I believe. 1 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. in the UK. I hope that's right.
All right. It's a shot. We'll see. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.